Hi, this is Marcia.
And this is Kelly.
We are the 2U's of 2U's Fiber Adventures. Thanks for stopping by.
You'll hear about knitting, spinning, dyeing, crocheting, and just about anything else we can think of as a way to play with string.
We blog and post show notes at 2usfiberadventures.com.
And we invite you to join our 2U's Fiber Adventures group on Ravelry. I'm 100 Projects.
And I am Better in Motion.
We're both on Instagram and Ravelry, and we look forward to meeting you there.
Enjoy the episode. Okay, it's Marcia.
And it's Kim.
And we have just finished 4 days on Orkney. And we are now in Lothringen. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Lothringen, and we're staying at a hotel called Force.
Force of Nature.
Right, Force of Nature. And Force is spelled F-O-R-S-E-A.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I need to look up and find out what a force is. I think it's Scandinavian or Viking or something.
Viking. Caithness-like.
Yeah. But anyway, we just wanted to spend a little bit of time just let everybody know what we did on the Orkneys. And I'd say we had a fantastic time.
Yes.
The Orkneys are beautiful. It's a distance to go to get there. But once you get there, beautiful.
Beautiful. And the people were so kind and accommodating at every turn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when we last recorded, we were talking about the ferry, and I posted pictures on Instagram about the whole process of getting on the ferry. So we won't go over that again. But the day we arrived, we got off the ferry and checked into our hotel. And I should say too, we had one night at the Ayre Hotel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's spelled A-Y-R-E, which is right overlooking the harbor. But we could not get 4 nights at that hotel, so we had one night there, and then we moved. The next 3 nights we were at the Albert Hotel, and we couldn't get 4 nights at the Albert, so we couldn't get 4 nights at either hotel, so we had to split it, and it worked out fine.
Yeah.
And both hotels were very nice. But the first night we checked into the Ayre Hotel, and then we went out for a walk, and what was the first thing we discovered but...
A distillery.
A distillery, right. The Orkney Distillery, where they make gin.
Amazing.
Really very good gin. And we got there about 30 minutes before they were going to close, but they were very nice, and they made us each a drink, and we picked different gins. I had one that was very botanical, and you had one that was sort of spicy.
It was orange spicy, and what they did was the actual gin had an essence of orange, as well as the fever tree tonic.
Right.
And so the mix of those two is really pretty extraordinary.
And when we get home, we have to look. We know we have fever tree at home, but I've not seen the fever tree flavor. So the gin I had, as I say, it was botanical, and then the fever tree tonic they used was elderflower. Mm-hmm. And they're not... those tonics are not, they're not like drinking soda. They're not really strong. They're very subtle flavors. So, but when I get home, I need to look for the fever tree tonic water and see if I can get the other flavors. But anyway, that was very nice. And then we had dinner that night. We're not going to talk about that dinner because it wasn't very good. So we're just going to skip that. But the next morning we got up and took our flight to North Ronaldsay, which is the northernmost island of the Orkneys.
Kind of a refreshing flight.
It was very interesting, yes, having flown, in big Boeing or Airbuses. This was 8 seats.
Correct.
On Logan Air, and...
We walked out on the tarmac with the pilot.
With our pilot.
I think he might have even opened our door.
Yes, I think so. And there, as I say, there was just seating for 8 people. There were 6 of us. So there's 2 couples up front, and then Kim and I each had our own row of seats, which is each row had 2 seats.
Yeah, but very narrow in the back of the plane.
It's sort of like sitting in a 1962 Volkswagen bus with wings. And what was really fun, too, about the flight is it never got more than about 1,000 feet. And the flight's only 15 minutes long.
Yes.
So you could see all the sheep and the cows and the farms.
And the interesting thing is the clouds, you could see where the sun was coming through, the water would be one color, and where there were clouds, the water would be another color.
And where the clouds were, the water was sort of gray, but when the sun hit the water,
Gorgeous.
it looked almost like the Mediterranean or something, this turquoise blue, and you could see where there were sandbars. It really was.
Fascinating flight. It was better than a Disneyland ride. Not too bumpy.
No, and you could take water on the plane, your water
yes.
bottle. They don't, no security checkpoint, and the pre-flight check was pretty, I posted the video on Instagram, so a very minimal pre-flight walkthrough. Anyway, so we arrived at the airport, and we had pre-booked for two bicycles and helmets to be waiting for us at the airport, and they were there, and they told us just to drop a 10-pound note for each bike at the lighthouse, which I love that. You know, you don't have to pay for it ahead of time. They just trust you that you're going to
So
drop
are you
it off.
going to talk about how people were doing multiple roles?
Yes. So what we learned is there used to be a higher population, maybe 500 people, I think, on this island. And we should say too, the island is only 2 miles wide by about 4 miles. And there used to be about 500 people, and there's now only 50 people living on the island. So many people do multiple jobs. So, for example, the young woman who met us at the airplane to help open the doors and offload any luggage and the mail, she turned up later at the lighthouse to take us to the top of the lighthouse. And when we were at the top of the lighthouse, she explained that she also delivers the mail.
Yes.
And we learned that she also, on the way back, when we got back to the airport, we also found out that she also works for the fire department.
She's emergency volunteer fire.
We ride our bikes to the mill, and
it was lovely and mainly downhill, and the wind was at our back.
It was gorgeous sun.
Yes.
And beautiful
we saw
blue
sheep
sky.
On the beach.
Yes, we saw sheep on the beach, and sheep everywhere, and cows everywhere, and very picturesque cottages, and stone walls, and beautiful beaches. It was really gorgeous. And so...
And then on the road, as we were riding there, one vehicle passed us? I think two. I think all day, two.
Two, all day. And we were there quite a while, most of the day, all day really, until our flight at 6 o'clock. And only two vehicles passed us on the road. So we went to the mill, and it's not huge, but the woman who was working in the mill that day, Helen, and I think her name is Helen Galland, and this is another thing about people having multiple jobs. She works in the mill processing the fiber and spinning the yarn. She also then made us lunch in the cafe and rang up sales in the gift shop. So, and we found out at the end she also works for the fire. She also works for the fire department too. She took us on a tour of the whole mill. It
was fascinating.
Yeah.
And on many levels of just interesting fiber all over the place, but it was kind of like a controlled chaos. Every room had a purpose, and every machine had a purpose, and it was organized to get that purpose done. But there's a lot of other stuff around too. Like, I walked in initially with a knapsack on, which was a really bad idea. Small knapsack, but it was very close quarters.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
Well, it's not a large space.
No.
I mean, I think the equipment is typical of a small mill, but just no space in that building, very little. And we should say, I don't think we said this, but the mill is actually at the lighthouse, in one of the buildings at the lighthouse. The one thing different about their processing, or one of the challenges they have with their processing, is because the sheep are on the beach, they have sand in their fleece, which most sheep are not typically on the beach. So at home we don't normally have that issue with sand. And so she was talking about some of the challenges of washing and working with the fiber with the sand, and working with the equipment. And the sand can be somewhat damaging to the equipment too. So that was something different that I had not heard of that before.
And then the other thing I hadn't heard of is that they had a separator of hair from the fleece and the guard hairs.
Yes, because they were double coated.
Yeah. And that's what makes it more soft and easier to process, is to get the hair out.
Right, and much more pleasant yarn to work with without those hairs in there. But the hairs are not thrown away. That byproduct that goes for felting and furniture making. Didn't you say?
I saw that there was a purpose. I want to say stuffing of some sort. Yeah.
But I have to just say this about Helen is, both Kim and I wanted to buy yarn. I think maybe more than you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. They had some for sale in the gift shop, but just one off skeins, and I wanted to get a sweater quantity worth. And so we had left the mill and left lunch, and I said, I really wanted to buy a sweater quantity. She said, well, go ask her. So I went back in and I asked Helen, and she goes, well, I don't know, let me call the owner of the mill and ask her, because most of the wool that they're processing is being sent to the mainland, because I should also say the big island of Orkney is called the mainland.
Yes.
And Scotland is called the Scottish mainland.
Yes.
So there's a different, but she had, most of it is sent to Scotland or distributed throughout the United Kingdom. Some is sent to the United States, she said. So there's such a demand for it, they really don't have anything for sale in the shop other than the one-offs.
Well, and she said that they only process what they have orders in to process.
Right.
So if nobody's ordered it, then they don't process it.
Right, and most of those orders are for outside of Orkney. So she said, well, go take the tour of the lighthouse. I will call the owner and see if you can buy a cone of yarn. So we took the tour of the lighthouse, which we'll talk about that. And I went back and she said, yes, the owner said that I could buy a cone. And I said, okay, well, let me look at the cone. She says, well, I don't have it. I have to go make it. So she said, see all that fleece is laying there? That's what I'm going to make for you. So I said, but I don't know how I'm going to get it. And she said, I'm going to make it for you. She said, I'm going to stay late tonight. I'll make it for you. And then she was going into Kirkwall the next day for a weaving class. And so she took the name of our hotel. I paid for the yarn. And she delivered it to the hotel the next day, which was incredibly kind and generous of her. I was like, she did not have to do that.
And our hotel was very funny about it. They're like, sure, we'll accept a cone of wool. And when we got there was nobody at the reception desk.
My cone of yarn was just sitting on the desk, and I just took it. So just that everybody's been really
outgoingly nice.
Just exceptionally accommodating, and well, we can just do this for you. Oh, you don't want that? Oh, we'll just do that for you. Everybody's been super accommodating. So I was very excited about the wool. But then we should talk about the lighthouse.
Yes.
So
we met Billy,
who had been the lighthouse keeper for
30 years.
Yes, a long time.
A long time. He was a resident of North Ronaldsay, and they wanted to have somebody from the island that they didn't have to build another house for, according to Billy. So he was a resident and always lived in his own house. But he worked at the lighthouse through thick and thin. And that lighthouse has been through a lot. And he gave us a wonderful, I don't know, about a 30-minute talk about the history of why they decided to put a light there, and some of the problems with they had a static light that would actually cause shipwrecks rather than avoiding them.
They had 3 in one night, he said, when it was the static.
Yes.
Yeah, 3 shipwrecks in one night, yeah.
Because it really is a northerly point, which I think it's the Fair Isle is north of it, but pretty far north.
Yeah. So we climbed up 177 steps or something to the top. Incredible views. Unbelievably windy at the top.
Even our knit hats had to be hung on
we had to hang on to everything. And it was just really interesting. The light is no longer static. It used to be they had to wind it up, right? He said like a clock every hour and 15 minutes they had to wind it. I think it was in the mid-'80s, wasn't it, that the last lighthouse keeper was there. It's now all the lighthouses in the United Kingdom are controlled by...
they're automated.
They're automated, yeah. So they still have to do maintenance to it, but which
We saw the light bulbs.
Yeah, we saw the light bulbs sitting there. And then the other thing about Billy is apparently he always makes the paper is he's the only man in the United Kingdom that has 20 jobs. And his claim to fame is not only being a lighthouse keeper, but he says he had 20 jobs.
He's the busiest man on the island.
Yes. Now, I don't know what his other jobs are, but that's what he says. So maybe it's true because everybody has multiple jobs. So
Yeah.
then then after that, we rode over to the bird observatory. And
It was on the opposite end of the island.
yes, we rode all the way. And I should say, by that time, the wind had picked up. And it was even though North Ronaldsay is relatively flat, it's very hard to pedal into that wind.
Well, and the airport, which is in the middle of the island, is at the highest point.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to go to the highest point, but then to go to the other end.
But even going downhill into that wind, you kind of had to pedal. It was hard.
There was no coasting that afternoon.
No. But we get over to the bird observatory, and we cannot tell you anything about it because it was only open from 12 to 2. So we didn't get into it.
Yeah, we wanted a cup of tea.
Yeah, we were desperate at that point. And so we just decided to head back to the airport, and our flight was around 6 p.m. And we got there, I don't know,
4:30?
something like that. And we were really hungry at that point, too. So we had water and had thought ahead to pack some energy bars. So we each had one of those. Yeah, and then we watched our plane come in.
Sideways. Because they had the same wind that we had on the road.
Yes, it was very, we watched that plane come in. It was sort of like coming down, but moving off to the side, and then it would sort of go back, and and then we got on that plane.
It was fine. I mean, it was a little rough on the takeoff, but he was fine once he hit altitude.
And there was movement. There was clear movement, but we were fine, and it was 20 minutes, a little bit longer because of the wind. We were going into the wind. But anyway, everything was great. We landed. And then just went back to the hotel and just relaxed for a little bit. And then we went out and looked for dinner. Kim had seen online one of the top rated restaurants was an Italian restaurant called Lucano. And the food was very good.
Excellent.
It was excellent food. I think it's worth a stop there.
It's a casual family restaurant, just to set expectations.
Yeah.
It's a little frenetic.
Yes, it was. I don't know what was going on, but I have to say it did not bother me, the chaos and frenetic feeling in there, because it was kind of entertaining to watch. Because everybody was, it sort of felt like something had gone amiss.
Maybe.
Like maybe the fryer was down, or maybe the head cook had quit or something. I don't know. They felt like something had happened, and
but the food tasted great.
Yeah, they were all running around, and lots of frantic communication between all of the waitstaff and the owner, or the woman who was sort of running everything. But the food was delicious. So, and then I think after that we just went back to we went to the bar and got 2 whiskeys.
Yeah, we learned after the first night that if you don't ask for a double, you get a very short pour.
So we discovered it was really nice just to go to the bar and we'd get 2 whiskeys and then lay on our beds and watch trashy TV and drink our whiskeys and knit. So anyway, then the next day was really great. We had organized, we contacted a woman named Lorna from Sea Orkney. And the website is seaorkney.com. And she met us about 9:30, I think, and took us to visit the Neolithic sites. And it was really nice. We should also say, too, that there was a huge, giant cruise ship had arrived in the city that morning. And they said between passengers and crew, there was 10,000 people on the ship. And Kim, do you remember how many people live in Kirkwall?
Yeah, a little over 9,000.
Yes. So more people were on the ship than were in residents of Kirkwall. So when we went to the Neolithic sites, we did have tour groups there.
And tour buses.
But Lorna was really good about, I think just the fact that there was just 3 of us moving,
Yep.
we can move a lot faster than a group of 40 to 60 people. And
There was a lot of skill, though, that she had.
yeah.
She knew where to park, how to maneuver at every stop, and where the sites were going to be super crowded and where they were not. And she was known by all the places that we went.
Everywhere we went, they knew her.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, go on in. You know, they were, I mean, we paid, but I mean, they would kind of
Well,
figure out how to...
actually, what we did was we bought an Explorer Pass, which was good. I think it's good for a week, and so we could go to all the sites for a reduced price, and the more sites you went to, the less it was.
So, well, let's just talk about the sites that we saw. So, the first one we saw was the Standing Stones of Stennis. They're sort of like the... well, they're standing stones. They're just these big stones, and they're tall. They're maybe 10 feet, 15 feet tall.
Yeah.
And she was saying 2/3 of them are above ground and another third are below ground.
Yeah.
And they form a ring. Some are missing.
And they're about 2,000 to 3,000 years older than Stonehenge. And they're just fascinating. And what people have done to them over time, because people didn't understand what they were, we saw one somebody had bored holes in it to a farmer because they were in his field and he just wanted to clear his field.
Well, he was tired of them as people began to become more interested in them.
Yes.
More and more people showed up in his field, and he got irritated. He wanted to be left alone, so there was one stone he actually dynamited.
Yeah.
And he was about to dynamite these stones, and you can see the holes, and then everybody stopped him. But he didn't like all of the interruptions, and he wanted to be quiet. That second day we were there, we did not see Maze Howe. We saw it actually our third day. But I just bring it up because the standing stones actually line up with Maze Howe.
Yes.
So Maze Howe is a...
underground chamber. They don't know really what it was for. It was a place to store treasure. I'm not sure the dates of if it predates the standing stones. I somehow think it does.
I think it does, and the unique thing about it is that on the longest day, I thought it was the longest day of the year, or excuse me, yeah, the longest day of the year. It's actually 6 weeks on either. It's
Yes.
3 weeks on either side of the longest day of the year. That at sunset, the sun goes through the standing rocks through that circle.
Is it the longest day? I thought it was the shortest day in December.
You're right, it is. It's the
Okay.
shortest day. I'm sorry. It's the shortest day of the year. They line up with the entrance to Maze Howe.
So there's a shaft of light that shines into Maze Howe, through the whole structure to an alcove within it. So it's kind of creepy to see the sun, shaft pointing all the way back.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we did not see that because we were here in June, obviously. And then we saw the ring of Brodar. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think
Brodar,
it is. Yeah.
which is again sort of like Stonehenge. That idea with these standing rocks in a circle.
I thought it was almost larger.
Yes.
Because I've been to Stonehenge. It's not as clipped and groomed as Stonehenge, but actually it felt much more like a ritual religious site. And the indentations around it were really distinct.
Weren't there?
There was just one big moat around it.
Yeah, and this is not as deep as it had been.
Yes.
Right.
And most of the stones were still standing in the Ring of Brodar. And it was up on a higher ground than the stones of Stennis and Maze Howe. So it looks like there's some kind of an alignment of all of those sites.
And then we saw Skaail, and that is, was where people lived. And again, all of these sites, we should say, people don't really know 100% what people did.
Yeah,
These
it's
are
a guess.
It's educated guesses, but it was a living community, and it used to be significantly larger. But the tide has washed a lot of it out. Is that there's a huge bay, and they believe that when the site was built, that bay was not there. So they've lost a lot of it, but you can see the houses, and where there would have been like in the center of the house, there was a fire pit, And then they actually had these stone beds where they would have standing, sort of these flat stones were set on edge. And then within that sort of square or rectangle, I should say, that they made, she said they would put straw and skins in there, and that's where they would sleep. And they even had storage in there.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting. These chambers were, I say they were sort of underground. They're built into the ground, and then they had
tunnels.
They had tunnels connecting them, and then the roofs were stoned to a point, and then they were wood and skins.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was wood. It was definitely skins and something like whalebone or something from nature that kind of made the top of it.
Oh, I didn't hear the whalebone.
Yeah.
Okay.
She said they were definitely, because there's not a lot of trees
Mm-hmm.
on the Orkneys. And I don't think even in the early geological times that there were a lot of trees.
That was interesting to see, and it was fun too. As you walk into the site, they have a stone set in the ground, starting with the man landing on the moon.
It's a timeline.
And as a timeline, and you could walk this path and see these stones, and you'd walk back in time to Skaail.
When it was built.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
And then the other thing, we'll just mention this too, is this has nothing to do with Skaail or anything, but there is a house there called Skaail House. I think it's Skaill house. And you get to go and take a tour of that house, which was interesting.
It was a bishop's house for a long time.
Yeah. So, but we walk into they have a gift shop. We took a tour of the house. It was very busy because of the cruise ship being there. And we go into the gift shop, and both Kim and I spied a yarn. And Kim bought a kit to make a pillow or a cushion.
Cover.
And it's the North Ronaldsay yarn. And then I bought 3 skeins of yarn. And it was interesting because there was the gentleman who works there. He must have been like the manager or something. And he was talking to you about the yarn and about the cost of the yarn.
Yes, he said most people have a large concern about why is this so expensive to buy this small thing of yarn? But it was North Ronaldsay yarn, and that's why we were both so interested in it.
And he was intrigued that we went straight to the yarn.
Yes,
And not all of the
trinkets.
The trinkets, yes. Oh, and then we went. This was very interesting. It was the, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this, Brough, Brough of Birsay.
Yes.
And that was interesting, and this is why it's nice to have a guide.
Yes.
Because we would not have known about this at all. But this is it's a Viking settlement. And you have to go across a, like a causeway, I think, but it's only accessible when the tide is out.
Exactly.
And you have
a 4-hour window on each, so 2 hours before the lowest moment, and then 2 hours after the tide starts to come in. And then if you're on the island and the water's crashing over, because it's stones, it's not safe to venture across the causeway because there's rocks and covered with seaweed on either side of the causeway.
Well, and it's covered with water. You can't get across. You can't get across it. So, but that was really fun. It was really good too because we crossed this causeway and looked at the Viking settlement, at what's left of it, I should say. And then you can go for a walk all the way to the top of the hill, and there's a lighthouse up there. But really what is spectacular about it is it's almost like someone has taken a piece of wood and tipped it on its side. So the low point is down where this causeway is, and the high point is just a sheer drop off down to the water. And it's one of those things, and no guardrails when you get up there. And it's literally, you would walk to the edge and it just drops straight down to the sea and rocks. The stuff of movies, right?
Yes, exactly.
So but it was beautiful to walk up to the top of that hill. All 3 of us were
apprehensive.
Apprehensive about going near the edge. So none of us really went that close to the edge.
Even though there had been a puffin sighting.
Yes, and there was a man actually sitting with his legs sitting on the edge with his legs dangling over the edge, watching for the puffin. He had seen the puffin, but it was gone.
Yeah.
But there was lots of birds nesting in that rock wall. That's such an interesting formation.
Yeah. And it's something that you see in a lot of pictures about the islands, but to actually experience it up close is just kind of surreal.
Yeah. The last site that we saw that day was the Brough of Gurness, and that was another site where people had been living.
I think it was a Norwegian or a Viking settlement. Yeah. And it was very well preserved somewhat. I mean, you could see the whole structure of the foundation and the center dome. It had 2 layers. So if they were under siege, they could live in that dome for quite a while because it had fresh water and a place for supplies.
Yeah.
And it was just like Skaail Brae, it was right on the edge of the ocean. And that one was particularly interesting because you could see where the Atlantic Ocean was meeting the North Sea. And it would look like a waterfall of currents when the 2 oceans met.
That was near the woolshed, right?
It was both
places?
Yeah.
So that's what, and then we mentioned that actually the next day we went to Maze Howe, but we talked about that already. Just we're putting all of our Neolithic sites, we're grouping them all together. And I should say the nice thing about Lorna too is she suggested that we just go, you have to make a reservation to see Maze Howe. And she said really it'd be better, she didn't need to take us there because the only way you can see it is on a guided tour.
Yes.
So it was not the best use of her time was to see these other sites and go on our own to Maze Howe, which I appreciated her saying that.
And she added a lot of the history, and when we were driving around, would explain things about the formations of the land, the houses, the bull who looked to be lame. Just knew the landscape so well.
And this is her area, so she knew who lives in the houses. She knew the lame bull and how sad he was. He was just standing in the field by himself all the time, and she knew a lot about all the different people and the houses that were being built and what was going on with these houses. It was really interesting. So then she did take us to 2 places, and the first it's called Barony Mills, and they make flour out of, it's an ancient grain, it's a barley, and I have the brochure here. It's BERE meal. And it's kind of, I bought a package of it. I've not opened it up, but all of the bread, we've had two types of, 2 breads made with it, and they don't add anything to it in terms of
sweetness,
but it's a dark brown color. And so I bought a package of it, and I bought for £1 a little cookbook, so I'll try making some of the bread when I get home.
And we had, they make them into the Burmese bannocks.
Bannocks, yeah.
They are interesting round pieces of bread, and we had it in 2 different places. And one we think was a little bit dry, and the other was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it was really good, yeah. So, and then the other place she took us then was the woolshed, and that was really fun. It's in an old stone croft house.
And it was great to have Lorna because, number one, she called to make sure that they were open. And 2, the road that she went up, it was quite the uphill journey into people's driveways if you don't know where you're going. And not the easiest thing to do, but...
No, it felt a little awkward.
Yes.
Because I think we should say that in Orkney there's a lot of artists, and they actually have the craft trail that you can follow, but a lot of the studios are in people's homes.
Or workshops next to their homes.
Right. In this case, the workshop was next to her home. Charming building.
Yes.
Super charming. In fact, we noticed that she said she had lived in the house 40 years, I think.
Yeah.
And she bought the house this way where there's these iron implements they just stuck into the wall, in between the stone. And she said they've always been there since she's owned the house. Yeah. So
like a pitchfork, tongs, and a hook, to hold the door open. Yeah, it was just weird outdoor. Yeah,
but it was kind of fun. And so Kim bought some beautiful kind of espresso brown wool
DK.
weight to make a shawl.
Yeah, and it was interesting because she said the wool definitely comes from fleeces on either Orkney or North Ronaldsay, but the processing of wool is hard, and North Ronaldsay is full, so she has it processed in Wales.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely...
And she had some that was also processed at New Lanark,
Yes.
that we saw last year. And I bought a sweater quantity of DK as well, in kind of like a gray, like steel gray kind of, or a silvery gray.
The thing with the North Ronaldsay sheep is that the fiber has so much depth to it because it's natural colors and it's not a solid dyed something. It is just the natural colors of a sheep's fleece.
Yeah, really pretty. I think the only thing we did then after that, we came back from the tour. Is that the day we slept? We were so tired.
We have been
I don't
very
remember.
tired. Yeah,
I don't remember.
I don't think we had time because I had to make reservations at 6:30 for dinner.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, we went to dinner at the Orkney Hotel and we had a lovely meal. It was very nice. So we would recommend that. Our last day there, yesterday, was basically kind of our shopping day because
Yes.
there's some things that we were looking for. Kim was looking for jewelry, and she bought a really pretty set of earrings at a store called Ortak. I think that's...
Yeah.
We don't know how any of this is really pronounced, but it's Ortak. They're very nice. They have some blue...
They were like a coastal blue enamel shape on a silver background.
Yeah, really pretty. And then I had another shop, I bought a kind of an interesting raincoat from a company called Sea Salt or Salt and Sand or something.
I thought it was sea salt.
I don't remember. Anyway, they had been talking about it at the retreat, this company. So I bought this raincoat. It's very cute. After shopping, we left and went to Maze Howe.
Yes.
Which we talked about. And then after that, we drove over and looked at the Italian chapel, which is a chapel that Italian prisoners of war built out of, they don't call them Quonset huts, but that's kind of, they have a different name for them, but that's what they look like. And that was very interesting and kind of poignant.
It was.
What I thought was amazing is these Italian prisoners of war were caught in North Africa and were brought all the way to the Orkneys with the purpose of building the causeways that they built during the war. And
and the causeways were really important because they linked all the islands. And so instead of having to take little ferries between the islands, now you have these really solid structures with these huge cement blocks that make going in between the islands pretty easy.
so I was kind of struck, they were kind of slave labor.
Yes.
You know. But anyway, they built this chapel and it's very, I don't know, it's kind of poignant, kind of sweet. It's very... It's small, it's charming.
And the thing is, the chapel had carvings as well as amazing trompe-l'oeil that you said was done on paper.
I read the thing, and it's actually just like cardboard that they put up there, and painted it. So how it survived, I don't know with the dampness, but it has. And then we stopped and had lunch, and then we went to St. Margaret's Hope, because we also wanted to go to another shop called the Workshop and Loft, and we went a little crazy there. Would you say that's fair to say?
Well, it is exactly the kind of thing that it was very well merchandised, and it was amazing wools and fabrics and textures, as well as pottery and jewelry and purses, some nice watercolors on the wall.
Yeah, and we talked to the woman who was working in it. She said it's actually a committee. The shop has been there for 40 years.
Yeah.
And it's a cooperative is the correct term. And they review submissions for product, the different crafts to be in the shop, and really, really nice, excellent.
Amazing quality.
Very good quality, really good design, really unique and unusual and interesting. So they do a good job of, as Kim said, a very good job of merchandising it, but just a really good job of selecting the different crafts that are represented in the...
It took a lot of control not to walk out of there with more.
Right. So we cannot believe this as knitters, but we could not help ourselves. We each bought hand knit sweaters.
But okay, they were beautiful merino cashmere sweaters. So of course the wool right there, we knew the price of that.
Well, we should say too, but the wool is from Italy.
Yes.
So this is a little like, okay, we're here for the whole Scottish thing and the Orkney thing, but
They were knit.
But they were knit on the Orkneys,
Yes.
and so this cooperative actually creates the designs and are sent out to the local knitters to knit the sweaters. So I bought a beautiful, it's a red, well, we can't say it's red because it has so many colors in it, but it's predominantly red. It has pink and orange in there, and it's really these amazing colors.
It's like a tweeted yarn.
And Kim bought the same style of sweater, but a different pattern, though. It's sort of like an all-over seed stitch with some cable banding at the bottom and then on the cuffs. And yours is a beautiful...
Kelly green with a lot of light blue tweed going through it.
yeah, I would almost call it like a moss green,
Yeah.
I think is more... But it has, when you get it out into the light, lot of stuff happen. Lots of activity
lots
of color
of color.
in the yarn. Beautiful. And then the other thing, I can't believe I bought this either, being a knitter, but I've never made one, but I bought a Fair Isle hat that the woman who was running the shop, she had knitted.
Yeah.
And I put it on, it matches the sweater so perfectly. And I was telling Kim, well, I'm buying this for educational purposes because I would like to learn how to knit Fair Isle or do color work. So I had to buy this for learning.
Yes. And it is interesting because she tied knots at the end of the color changes. And I have done Fair Isle and always done, spit splicing and tried that way. Or at the very end, just weave in a lot of ends.
But she said this is how she learned to do it, is you just tie a knot and then cut it off, and it's about, I don't know, a quarter inch left. And then when you wash it,
It felts
kind of. And Shetland, like that Jameson Shetland, is sort of, as I said to her, kind of sticky, you know. So she said, yeah, that combined with then washing it and sort of felting a little bit, the knots just stay there. You don't have to weave in the ends. I thought that was interesting. We'll see as I wear it over the years what happens.
Well, and I think that the hat is going to be stretched and pulled around a lot more than a sweater or a garment because it's got to be stretched over your head.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Yeah. And then just a side note about the sweaters. We took we took the ferry this morning from St. Margaret's Hope on the Orkneys back to Gills on the mainland of Scotland. And as we were waiting for the ferry, there was this couple that gets out this really cute 60s era Mercedes and convertible sports car. And I had recognized the car from the restaurant the night before, and then the woman gets out and she's standing there waiting for her husband to park the car. And I went up to her and I said, I know where you bought that sweater, because she had one of the sweaters on too, but in kind of the natural gray color. Equally beautiful. So we were sort of laughing about these sweaters that we all had them. And she had just bought hers just before she got on the ferry.
Yes.
So after all of our shopping, we went back to the hotel and just kind of crashed for a little bit. And then the hotel got dressed up because the hotel was kind enough to make us reservations at a restaurant called Foveran, and that's Foveran, and it's outside of town a little bit, up on a hillside overlooking
Kirkwall.
Looking back towards Kirkwall and the harbor and the bay, and then in front like fields with sheep and cows grazing, and beautiful night. It had been sort of raining on and off, but the sun came out. It was beautiful. And we had a fantastic dinner.
Oh, yeah.
We shared scallops as a starter. I had the sea bass, right? Which was very good. And Kim had the chicken.
It was chicken with rocket pesto and taglione pasta. And what I really loved is that every meal came with 2 dishes of vegetables as a side. That was just part of the dinner. And the veggies were fabulous.
Yeah.
And one was potatoes and one was carrots, broccoli.
Yeah.
And fava beans.
I said, what are those? They said they're beans. And they were fava beans. That was interesting. And then, but the best part, the meal was fantastic, but then dessert came. And Kim had a kiwi,
lime,
and gin sorbet. And
it's like a shot of gin.
It's like a shot of gin because it's just frozen. It's not been cooked off, right?
Yeah.
And then I had the rhubarb summerberry crisp with, they call it custard, but it's this like sauce that you put over it, and that was pretty darn good. That was excellent. So that was pretty much it. We went home and we packed, and then we just got up this morning and headed to the ferry. Mm-hmm. We'll just mention today, not much happened today.
No, well, because we were so busy on Orkney, and it was a transition day, and it was raining really hard this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, it was pouring
Yeah.
when we were driving. So we just drove to Wick, found a restaurant, had lunch.
really nice Bordelot.
Mm-hmm. And just had a sandwich there, and then came
Had
to...
a crepe.
Yes, yes, we had a crepe that they ignited. And then just came to the place where we're staying, this force of nature. And we just kind of laid down and slept for a little bit because I think we were both exhausted. We've been going to bed about midnight and getting up about 7 and going all day. So I think it was a good day just to kind of chill out and rest a little bit. But we'll just mention dinner tonight. So the owner of the hotel had recommended...
The Bay and Owl.
Yeah, the Bay and Owl, and it's a restaurant just a couple miles down the road because we're sort of out in the... We're out in...
We are out in the boonies.
Out in the boonies right now, and so we drove, I don't know...
10 minutes?
10 minutes to Dunbeath, to this restaurant, and he warned us, disregard the exterior. So I will post a picture of the exterior of this restaurant on Instagram. If I was driving by, I would never go in that restaurant.
Yeah.
But we went in, it's quite nice inside, has a beautiful view.
Panoramic view.
Yeah, overlooking the bay, and you can see Dunbeath Castle on the other side. And we had a very nice meal. We both had the sole in kind of a piccata sauce.
So good.
Very good. Kim had rice, I had the potatoes, and some green beans, which were perfectly cooked, really good.
Yeah.
And a salad. And then, then dessert.
Because I've seen this on many menus, and I really wanted to try it. And Marsha was like, "Oh, we had that on British Air, and it was really bad." And
It was like in Dixie cups or something. It was.
and so it's called sticky toffee pudding. Mm-hmm. And I said, I just want to see. It sounds like a basic, and it came. And the woman, the waitress asked, "Well, do you want cream with that? It comes with ice cream. Do you want cream too?"
Yeah, and we're like, what? She's like, I'll just bring it on the side, the cream. So it came, and it's this very moist sponge cake, but it's very dark color. It's
From
not
the dates.
Yes, and it's not chocolate. We knew that, and we thought maybe it was like gingerbread or something. We found out later they use treacle, and which I think is it's not molasses, but it's a form of sugar but it's not a granular. It's a syrupy kind of thing, and dark brown sugar, I think, and the dates that have been cooked. So it's this very dark cake, and then they put this caramel syrup over the top of it, and then had these 2 scoops of pretty darn good, probably Orkney vanilla ice cream. And I don't know, like heaven in a bowl, right?
Yeah.
Very
we
good.
shared it, thankfully, because it was a very big portion. And then we started to try, what would it be with a little bit of cream? Yum.
Yeah, and then I can see why you just poured the whole thing over it. It was good. It was so good. Yeah. So the desserts have been pretty incredible on this trip, I have to say. Okay.
That wraps it up?
I think that wraps it up, and we're going to pour ourselves another round here, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And knit for a while.
Bye.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. To subscribe to the podcast, visit 2usfiberadventures.com.
Join us on our adventures on Ravelry and Instagram. I am Better in Motion, and Kelly is 100 Projects.
Until next time, we're the 2 U's
Doing our part for World Fleece.